On the front drive shaft for the four-wheel drive going to the transfer case, this flange here has Allen bolts in it, and those are number 6. We're going to go ahead and use our Allen swivel extension and our impact to remove all of these. You can just manually grab that drive shaft and rotate that so you have access to all of these. Once this is removed, we're going to move to the forward part of the drive shaft and do the same up there. Now we're going to go ahead and use a dead blow hammer just to try and work this flange free. Rotate this unit. Now we're going to try and compress this part of the drive shaft on itself. Now the interior cap for this drive shaft did pop off. It's in the front part of the drive shaft yoke. We're going to use a screwdriver just to reach in there and pull that back out. With this unit, compress as much as we can get it. It does have a lot of play. We're now going to move to the back section here and loosen that one. We're going to go ahead and use a punch and a hammer. There's a small ridge on the inside of the drive shaft unit here. We're going to go ahead and tap on that to try and work that out. Go ahead and rotate that. And we're going to work our way around. So now that we have that loose, we want to go ahead and rotate this a little bit more. Now we're going to bring it up. I'm going to try and work the front drive shaft out. I have to use the pry bar on this side as well. We'll go ahead and remove that drive shaft. I'm going to go ahead and disassemble everything from this end of the drive shaft forward. I'm going to go ahead and pop off the front of this here. And just set that aside. Now there is a gasket on this side right here. I'll throw that inside the cap. And we want to go ahead and clean up the end here. So grab a rag, paper towel, whatever you need to do. And what we're trying to get to is this black clip right here. So I'm going to go ahead and try and use our snap ring pliers to remove this clip. And it seems like it's stuck, it does not want to move for us. We're going to go ahead and tap around the edge here. I'm going to try and just get a screwdriver under the edge here. Be sure to be wearing safety glasses. This spring may pop off. There we go, we're able to retain that unit. Now what we're going to do is we're going to remove these clamps. And just use a pair of cutters. We'll go ahead and pop these off here. We'll do the same for the back here. Now with this clip removed from here, we should be able to slide the entire unit off. The boot itself is grabbing pretty good. We're going to be replacing that boot, So what we're going to do is simply use your razor, go in, put a slit in it. What we're doing is we're just working the whole unit right off of the drive shaft here. I'll go ahead and put this aside. Now we have the entire drive shaft exposed here. Let's go ahead and clean this. You want to make sure that the groove for your clip on the end is cleaned up as well. Make sure there's no rust or anything like that built up in there. All right, so now we have the old bearing, we have the new one here. You want to make sure that you install on the drive shaft the same way. Now if you notice there's a thicker band here and a thinner band, we're going to match it up this way here. Also want to make sure that on this side here has a recessed section for that gasket. And then we have the recessed section here for the gasket there. We're going to start assembling with the boot first. I want to make sure that we have the band in place. We can slide the band down. And what we're going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the shaft itself to help this boot slide down. Next, go ahead and set the large band up and over the boot. Next, you want to use a supplied tube of grease. This gets very messy. Make sure you have some towels, rags around, whatever you got to do. But you're going to go ahead and start squeezing the grease into the bearing cage like this. Work your way around. Now you can manipulate the bearing cage itself by pushing it around. And what you want to do is you want to work that grease into all of the bearings. You want to do this on both sides. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and just clean up the flange. We want to remove the grease from the flange side here. Next, what we're going to do is take your gasket . You want to set the gasket in place. Next, you want to take your cap and you want to set this down. You want to go ahead and line up the holes. You want to go ahead and tap this down. If you see the gasket moving, you can always use a pick or a small screwdriver to just kind of reach in there and line up that gasket. Now, if you're trying to get this flange to line up evenly around, we're going to go ahead and use a block here and just put it around the top. You want to go ahead and just tap that down evenly. That's going to help you get this down without hammering the flange and screwing that up. At this point here, you can put a little bit more grease on the inside and work that around. Now let's go ahead and install this on the shaft. And line that up, push that down, and work the boot onto that. Now we have this pressed onto the splines. You want to go ahead and tap this flange in and just gently work your way back and forth, working that bearing unit in. You can use a socket on the end of this as well. Put a socket on the top end here and tap that in. What that's going to do is expose the splines, and we want to get down to where we can put put that clip on there. Using your lock ring pliers, I'll go ahead and get this installed. And just press around the edges with a screwdriver, make sure that's lined up and it's in the groove. It looks like it's locked into place. If you have any grease left over, now's the time you want to go ahead and squeeze that into the bearings. Get it packed in as much as you can. Now we're going to do a little cleanup. What we want to do is pay attention to the inside of this flange here again. And right where the gasket is going to go, we want to go ahead and clean that as well. And go ahead and get our gasket lined up. And then put our cap on. Use our mallet. You can use a rubber mallet. Tap that on. Now what you can do, just to test everything, go ahead and put your bolts through. Make sure everything lines up, and do this all the way around the perimeter. Now I want to go ahead and tighten up this band clamp. I'm going to go ahead and use a punch just to set this down inside. Now I want to go over and tap these ears over. Let's go ahead and repeat the same for the inner. And go ahead and tap down these clamps. There you have it. Now, upon installation of the front drive shaft, there are shorter bolts and longer bolts. The shorter ones go on the rearward side going into the transfer case. The longer bolts go into the front side going into the front differential. I'm going to bring the rearward side up. We need to adjust it so we can get the front part of the drive shaft up and in. Now you want to pay attention to the placement of the bolt holes. So before you push this in, I want to make sure that we can go ahead and get a couple of the bolts started here. So we're just going to push those in. By holding that front yoke and turning the drive shaft, and the bolt will slide into place. We're going to try and catch a few threads on that. Once we have a couple of these started, we're going to go ahead and get the remainder of the bolts started on the front flange. I'm going to go ahead and just finish tightening these down. Let's move on to the rear. I'm going to go ahead and try and repeat the same process. You're going to line up the flange bolt holes. I'm going to work a couple bolts into it. And slowly move the drive shaft back and forth so you can feel them catching on the holes and try and get the bolt started. Now with those two bolts snugged up, we have now pulled the drive shaft into the yoke evenly. Now we're going to go to the other bolts and snug those down. Now we're going to go around and we're going to torque all of these down to 22 foot-pounds. You can see as we try to turn it, it is going to spin the drive shaft. So we're going to use a pry bar. We're just going to put it between the bolt and the flange here just to keep it from spinning. And we'll repeat this for all the bolts. So normally we would use a pry bar for something like this. We're going to use a screwdriver at this point because it has a thinner tip on it. We can get it between the bolt and the flange to go ahead and hold that in place from keeping it from spinning while we tighten the front bolts. And that's it. We have all the bolts torqued to 22 foot-pounds. And the flanges are in evenly on both sides.